Kakadosh Boker Tov. We're continuing with halachot of Bedikat Chametz, and now it's brought down as follows: we are not allowed to make a pasek, an interruption in speech throughout the Bedikat Chametz, which means between the beracha and the Bedikat. If we did speak, so then it depends. He says if we're going to speak with things which has nothing to do with the Bedikat, we have to make a new beracha. However, though, he says in the middle of the Bedikat, you are allowed to speak about anything to do with the Bedikat, but you shouldn't speak about other things, right? Even if you already started the Bedikat until after the Bitul, right? Why? Because since some people say that you would have to actually go and make a new bracha, so therefore, even though we don't hold like that, but still, because it's safek berachol akel, but still we're not going to speak about other things during the Bedikat Chametz. I mean, during Bedikat Chametz, we're not supposed to speak about anything to do with Bedikat. So you're going to tell your child, listen, pick up the carpet, right? Open up this cupboard door, check over there, open this, do that. That you're allowed to, because it has to do with the Bedikat. Anything to do with the Bedikat, you're allowed to talk about, but anything which is not to do with the Bedikat, you do not. Now, you are allowed to answer whether it's a man, in the middle of the Bedikat, or if you hear, right, or you see the lightning and the thunder, you're allowed to make those berachot, right, or a shed yatzar, if a person had to go to the washroom, all these things, right, you are allowed to do during Bedikat Chametz. There's no problem because it's tzorech mitzvah. Now, if a person forgot to make the beracha of Bedikat Chametz, he's allowed to make the beracha as long as he did not finish a Bedikat, which means as long as he's in the middle of Bedikat Chametz, he's allowed to come and make the beracha throughout the entire time. We do not make shechianu during Bedikat Chametz, but since there are some poskim that hold that you do, and one of them is the Pri Chadash, so therefore Rav Ovadia Yosef brings down that it is better to get a new fruit and to make a shechianu and to have in mind the Bedikat Chametz as well. Even though, again, obviously, l'alacha, if a person does not have new fruit, he does not do it, but he's doing it in order just to suspect for those she taught about making shechianu. Now, we are allowed to make one beracha for many different places. So, for example, you have to check your house, and you're going to check now your office, and you're going to check your, let's say, for example, your cars. You're going to check your boats, your planes, whatever it is that you're going to check exactly. So in all these cases that you're going to check, you make one beracha for everything. Because one beracha exempts everything as long as there's not going to be a efsek in between. However, though, if it's going to be mamash, very, very, very far away, and therefore for sure there's going to be a hesech hadat, so then you should have the kavanah during the birkat of Biru Chametz that he's doing beforehand, that he does not want to be tzedek chovah in the second place, and then he will be able to make a beracha in the second place. But if it's going to be close by, right, so then for sure a person should have that in mind. As a person, again, he has to do Bedikat Chametz in all those places, as we already mentioned. If the balabait wants, he's allowed to put one of his family members, right, or somebody that he knows during the time of the Bedikat, and they should have kavanah to answer a man, and afterwards they split up, and they're allowed to split up and do Bedikat Chametz. That means basically the balabait is getting somebody else to help him with the Bedikat Chametz. It's not only him, he's getting other people also to help, and he's allowed to do that, and there's no problem whatsoever. Now he says, if the balabait is not going to check whatsoever, and then he's going to get somebody else, appoint somebody else to do the bidikah, so then the shaliach that means the messenger is going to doing the beracha, and it's not going to be the balabait that he's making the beracha. What exactly needs Bedikat Chametz? So obviously we already mentioned whether it's going to be in the balconies or in the cracks and crevices of all the house, balconies, the storage places, whether it's going to be cheder madrigol, which is basically the staircases, right, or anywhere that's leading up to it, or any place where there was going to be any type of a chametz. Now remember that even if there's going to be a lot of tircha, a lot of toil in checking properly, you're supposed to do this because the fum tzara agra. If you remember, we always bring down from the daily halacha when Rabbi Mansur comes and he says that people, they made it into a ritual. What does that mean, a ritual? You come, you do bedikat chametz. What you do is, the children, they come, they put 10 pieces. The second that you found 10 pieces, you come and you already close shop. 1 second. Maybe you only did 8 out of the 10 rooms. Doesn't matter. For you already did the ritual. I came and I did whatever, and that's it. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Bedikat chametz is supposed to be a true bedikah, a real bedikah for making sure that there's no chametz anywhere whatsoever. And that's why it happens that sometimes they call you in the middle of Chol Hamoed, I found chametz. Well, 1 second, how did you find chametz? You didn't look for it beforehand. So obviously it means that our bedikat chametz has to be a little bit more in depth. And again, the fum tzara agra, according to the toil that we are doing, that is going to be the reward that we get when we're doing that. Now he comes and he says, all the different places which have like different holes, right, which are on the common scenario, you're obligated to check. But he says if it's going to be so high up that there's a little crack or crevices on the ceilings or anywhere around the ceilings that you cannot even get there, so therefore he says they do not you do not need bedika whatsoever, because obviously probably you didn't actually come and hide the chametz all the way up there, that you got some type of a ladder and then you went up and you started getting there over there. Okay, a house which has little children, they have to check, right? He says all the different places, even if it's going to be less than 3 tfachim, even if you didn't know them, even if it's going to be less than 24 centimeters, right, and all these different little tiny holes or things like that, you would have to check, because obviously children come and they put chametz everywhere, so that's very, very important. To do with sefarim, the shita of Rav Ovadia, this was actually very famous between Rav Ovadia and the Chazon Ish, but Rav Ovadia says that sefarim do not need bedikat chametz from the pirurei chametz which are inside of them, but rather you do bitul, and you do kal chamiran, that's it. You don't even have to put a mechitza, and you don't have to do these things, and you're even allowed to learn in the sefarim on Pesach without bedika, without any type of problem whatsoever. You're allowed to use them, right? If a person has a car, so as we already mentioned previously, you should check the cars as well, and even if you're not going to use it, right, during the days of Pesach, you should still check it from chametz. The same halacha applies to buses. If people have buses, right, also they would have to do the exact same thing. So he comes and he says like this. He says, to do with the berachas, we already mentioned you don't have to do a new beracha on the car. To do with batei knesiot and batei midrashot, it says even the batei knesiot and batei midrashot, they need bedikat chametz through the gabay or the shamash of the Beit Knesset, right? That's why we always appoint them every single year, right? That they are in charge of all the different things, so therefore they have to actually also do bedikat chametz as well. Okay, if right now you want to sell it to a goy, so for example you have a room and you want to sell it to a goy, so he says if you're going to sell it to the goy on the 14th in Shachrit, so then you do not need bedika on the night before, because since you're going to sell it anyway to a goy, so you don't need to. So for example, let's say there's one room that I'm selling to a goy. I'm selling the entire room. I'm not selling the entire house. I'm selling the entire room. So therefore that room does not need bedikat chametz, because since in the end I'm going to rent out the entire room to the goy, so therefore, I do not need to do the bedikat chametz in that room, and then we'll continue Bezat Hashem with a bitul and everything else.